Welcome, everyone. I'm calling in. I'm calling in from New York because I have a 1-month-old grandchild, so I'm here helping out. So if you hear a baby crying, my son is taking care of him. Just a little bit about who I am, so you know how I come to this environment and how I come to water. I work for the city of Los Angeles, and I am an architect. And I help the city design and build parks, public facilities, bridges, a bunch of other infrastructure. And of course, LA wouldn't exist without the transportation, really, it is transportation of large amounts of water from very distant locations. So the engineering and use of water through time by all of human inhabitation is something that we're going to hear about this morning. I'm very excited to have Kelly Shannon here, who wrote one of the chapters. The other chapter, the other essay in the water chapter was by Silvia Piccone, and she looked at more of the natural changes that we can witness in the Alps from man's impact on water regimes and the concern about those changes. You know, from that famous photograph that was taken for the first space trip, where if you look back at the planet and saw we are in fact a water planet. And, you know, water is key to all of the other natural systems, and water is key to all of the life on the planet. And yet we have, with industrialization, taken a very kind of crude approach to harnessing water that is coming back in many ways to bite man. And we're at a time where we need to reconsider our approach to water use, water engineering, water pollution as we look forward. So it's a really important topic for consideration. I'll let Kelly introduce herself. She's an architect, but for a long time has been a professor of what she calls water urbanism. And she's going to take us through some historical examples of how you read societies based on how they harness and use water. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Kelly, to proceed.
Kelly, I'm gonna let you share the screen. I have a delay in the sharing, I apologize. I had a slide with Kelly and Bruno's portraits, but is slowing down. You're muted, I think, Kelly, maybe.
Yeah, Kelly's muted.
Okay, very good. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Well, thank you very much to Deborah, but also to the whole team and Aliara, and for the invitation to also be part of this really exciting book and the entire project, actually, of looking at nature through different lenses and the involvement of artists, even if it includes architects and professionals and professors, I would say. So what I'm presenting today is coming from the chapter that I was invited to work on. And I've done this chapter together with my colleague, Bruno de Mulder. So as Deborah said, I'm an American architect, been working in Europe for quite some decades teaching, but actually most of my work is itself based in Asia. And my colleague, Bruno de Mulder, is a Flemish man, and we've been working on this notion of water urbanism, which we've now jumped to forest urbanism as well, understanding these relationships. So what I want to take you through is an understanding of how we've tried to dissect humankind's relationship to water and how it's been rapidly changing. So we know now that we're amidst, whether some people believe it or not, we know there are unfortunately still deniers, But amidst global warming, where also economic growth at all costs is the primary paradigm. And for our point of view, and I think most of you who worked on this book, we understand that we're really at this critical tipping point, where we have multiple crises, socio-ecological, clearly now more than ever, maybe political, but also spatial. For us, also understanding that this call by Antonio Guterres, we're being at a red code for humanity, understanding that we are at this kind of critical tipping point that needs our attention. What does it need our attention to? A radical reconceptualization of our relationship, humankind's relationship to land, to water, to the nature culture relationship, I would say more generally. So I'm going to take you through a series of different episodes, again, that come directly from our book, where we also called, the chapter was called Troubled Waters, and where we understood that we, in the year 2025, that we also maybe it would help us to look back in history, to look to other cultures and contexts in order to project forward. So here what we're seeing is we're trying to unravel a logic of a place that we visit, that we're engaged in research, where we try to understand indigenous knowledge, systems and practices, and how by necessity, humankind and different communities with different cultural contexts were able to really innovatively adapt to their environment. So what you're seeing here is a huge lake, the Tunnel Sap Lake in Cambodia, where inhabitants have been able to adapt their housing either to be floating or to live on very high stilts in order to deal with the tremendous differences of the water landscape. So many people also call this TEK, T-E-K, traditional ecological knowledge, which we find really interesting. And unfortunately, it's often coupled against SEC, so scientific ecological knowledge. So for us also, as Deborah introduced, we've been working for I would say many years now, and even decades, around the notion of water and understanding its particular relationship to urbanism. Understanding that, of course, humans need water. Many of our first settlements were usually had a deep connection to an inextricable link to water, and therefore needing water management. What we're seeing here is traditionally these are settlements in Belgium and in the Netherlands, so the lowlands, also parts of France, where many of the names of places are place names that also have to do with their location on the water. But what you're seeing here is also the system, the water network, whether it's coast or rivers, and how a great deal of villages, now cities, were formed and settled in a very particular logic related to water. Jumping across continents, here we're looking at a very old settlement system where we know humankind has invented very ingenious methods to manage water. So on the one hand, to catch rainwater, to seasonally store it, to release it into ponds, to tap into aquifers, to divert water for irrigation, and to drain water from waterlogged terrains, and to reclaim land. And from the 10th century onwards, what you're seeing here are the so-called way. It's a polder system on the Yangtze River, which no doubt inspired the Dutch polders in the Netherlands. Again, jumping around a little bit here, we're back in Cambodia. So what we find so interesting, this is a drawing, an abstraction, of course, of the great Khmer Empire in Cambodia from 800 to 1432 Common Era, which was a land-based system, but where water management basically determined the power of the institution, the power of the empire, and where it was really about water management. So what you're seeing are these enormous barrays, so these very large water tanks that were then complemented with a whole series of smaller water management systems. And what becomes very interesting in the Khmer and evident in the Khmer system is that this very pragmatic notion of water engineering was, the flip side of it was a symbolic, was a cultural kind of understanding, where the kind of mountain, temple mountains were a kind of flip side, and the culture was a flip side of the water management itself. So a kind of counter to the water management system that we saw in Cambodia. Here we're in present day Tehran, which is really an interesting system. So already again, from 550 before the Common Era, there was developed an ingenious system of water management that was underground, so it was unseen. It's these blue lines that you can see in the slide, and they were tapping the underground aquifer. They're known as kanats. So a very sophisticated system that came also with the Persian development in mathematics. And as a way to understand, is this tech, traditional ecological knowledge, or is it sec? It's probably a combination of the two, because again, it was a highly engineered system. They would tap the aquifer and have tunnels underground that would work at a slope of about 1 to 1,000 to then transport water to follow gravity and come out in an oasis further on. Whoops, that went too fast. Anyways, I can let me go back to one. So this is a system in Sri Lanka. So where, again, in 1000 BCE, the Sinhalese developed a system of tanks, so collecting rainwater or damming small creeks as a way to both create productive landscapes, agriculture, but also to have sacred landscapes. All of their monasteries, all of their gardens were around these water systems. So somehow both the intertwining of culture and nature were tied, and they really what we call settled with water. So not fighting water, but settling and making systems working with it. We of course know that all of that changed radically throughout the world as we industrialized. We started different modes of extraction. Excessive engineering came into play, and of course, all of this with quite devastating ecological consequences. So this is an example in Belgium, but it could more or less be anywhere in the world, certainly in Los Angeles, and the kind of channeling of the river. So the river, as we started to bring in more hard engineering, we started to substantially change the shapes of our waters. We also started for infrastructure, developing first railways and then highways that would follow where they had to go first along valleys and then even cutting through mountains. But they started to create, we would say, even dams in our water systems, substantially changing and creating a lot of huge water problems downstream. Again, here is, I'm back in Asia. This is a context where I say we're still working presently, spending quite a lot of time. And this is the Mekong Delta in Vietnam and in Cambodia. And for us, it's very representative of an extreme example of manipulation by humans, of taking an as-found condition, a condition that was a tropical swamp, a quagmire, and channelizing it, turning it into this great rice basket, rice bowl, transforming it for humankind. No, so if we understand that the primary occupations of humans on the planet are agriculture, forestry, and urbanization. Here, the entire water system was substantially transformed for agriculture and urbanism at the expense also, I would say, of its forest, its mangroves, and its various natural systems. Of course, as we modernized and continued with industrialization, one of the great drivers in this was the building of dams worldwide. Dams also to trap water for irrigation, but also more and more for hydroelectric power that completely transformed our water systems. Also, there's interesting projects, provocations, one of which we're seeing here, where we have these gigantic symbols of modernization. In the US, we had the TVA, we know, but here we see also a megalomaniac project by a fascist regime in Germany that was looking to kind of conquer the entire Mediterranean through a gigantic project of transforming the water, lowering the water table, building landfills, and creating bridges between the south of Europe and the African continent. So a kind of very representative of a kind of engineering, I would say, a little bit gone mad to the transformation of the waterscape. Again, jumping back here, you see a little obsession with Vietnam. And this is where we, and again, I say with Bruno and I, start understanding through design work that in order now to understand water systems, we need to understand them from their source to their outlet, and really beginning to understand systems, to understand basins. So here you're seeing a trajectory of the water source, in this case, the Perfume River, that trajects a wide trajectory across the historical imperial city of Hue, and where the water itself brings many different ways of settling, many different ways of productivity, and I would say even of abuse and its proper use. Of course, we know that pollution has become more and more a gigantic problem when we understand water systems. So after looking through, looking back in order to project forward in a non-nostalgic way, we tried to come to three. We concluded the essay in the book with three strategies. So one is really understanding how we could begin to renaturalize, to reverse engineer, and even in some places, because of the force, as Deborah said, of nature coming back to bite us, that maybe we also have to manage retreat, whether it's managing retreat from fire, as you have experienced in Los Angeles, or managing retreat from flood or from extreme conditions anyways. So water, we understand, is very much reconquering a design agenda after so long being out of sight, out of mind. And we had these three broad strategies. So as I say, this first one has a lot to do with an explicit recovery and almost choreographing ecological processes as humankind across scales. So at a regional scale, but also at very local scales. And again, for us, I think a wonderful example of that is an example in the American Northwest. So we understand that this dam, again, being representative of so many dams around the world, great expressions of engineering power, great expression of humankind's dominance over nature in order to exploit it for power, again, driving economy. And what I think is very powerful in the US and in other places is that this has been reverse engineered. It's been decommissioned, where again, this kind of channeling the river, keeping it in the straitjacket, controlling it with concrete and technology, is being allowed to break literally, again, with a lot of expense and a lot of engineering. So it's reverse engineering to bring back water, to bring back and allow a certain kind of natural recovery. The second strategy we tried to work through is understanding that, again, as once upon a time, we do have maybe something to fear from water. We understand that we're getting more intense, more frequent troubles with water, maybe also in some cases too little water. But in those cases where we have more flooding, more extreme events, can we live with the water instead of deny it? Try to change it, try to change our attitude towards nature, where we don't see it as only a peril, but we also start to change the way we live in agglomerations and settlements, but also at the scale of architecture, at the scale of buildings, where we could maybe rethink and learn from age-old typologies, where we had floating buildings and stilt buildings. If you remember back to the first image I showed in Cambodia. And understanding, of course, how we can combine low-tech and high-tech, how we can combine nature-based solutions together with engineering. So for us, it's never either or, but it's kind of both and. This is a project of a PhD student from a number of years ago here in Belgium. She worked in her home context of Bogota, and where it was very much about trying to understand how to make typologies that work with water, allowing water to flood, bring back a floodplain, allowing floodplains to become, again, expandable, contractible, depending on their condition. Here you see a building that's raised, but also how to this is an area where there's a strong agricultural greenhouses, particularly flower production, and where there's a lot of pollution from fertilizers. So how to also integrate water cleaning before we dump water back into nature, that we take care of it, we heal it, we clean it as a kind of responsibility back to the new relationship that we have with nature. And then finally, we understood that it's important to, of course, not, and I think that's what your book is doing and what you're always doing in your workshops and your residencies, is trying to understand that any one lens, it might be a very interesting way to start, but of course it's all about the interdependencies, the entanglements, the linking of these landscape systems that we have to pay attention to more and more, and again, design with. This was the result, this is the Brussels capital region that you're seeing in bright red. It's kind of urban periphery in pink. And then this is the Zonian forest to the south. And what we worked on in a workshop here is trying to understand how to bring back water, how to bring back forest, and to create different typologies that work with these systems. And for us, what I think has become increasingly important is understanding these relationships. I think, as you have very well in your book, between water and forest and soil and air and well, the elements that we see, very tangible, and the unseen. And I would like to just really finish with, again, being architects and urbanists and working as educators with the next generation. For us, it's really important, the belief and the responsibility that comes, almost a necessity for design. We still need strong actions. We need, it's now or never if we're going to really make an impact that we need in this, again, cascade of crises that we have. And for us, it's in that sense very interesting getting inspiration from writers, people like Arundhati Roy and Rebecca Solnit, that talked about also how all these crises that we have upon us are really portals to a new society of what we can become. One that's much more collaborative, I think very much what you're doing in your work, more adaptive and much more locally embedded. And of course, fundamental to that is new water relationships to forests, to humankind, to non-humans, as a kind of a total environment. So I stop there and I will stop sharing my screen. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. That was fantastic, provocative. And so I would love to open it up for any kind of questions or input or thoughts. Roxanne, I see you have your hand up.
I was actually just applauding, but
Oh, I see. Maristella's applauding as well. Right.
I
Okay.
think so. Yeah.
No, I'm applauding as well because Kelly is, of course, very clear. And the 3 points, specifically the renaturalization, is it correct? Yes, something like this, Kelly.
Yes.
Now, I noticed that in many of this process, the reforestation, renaturalization, I mean, coming back, it's an important concept. I mean, being able to go to a previous condition. Kelly, how many of this, I mean, it's a curiosity, I'm not a landscaper, I mean, I'm a historian, really pure, but I mean, how much of this is successful? I mean, the Western country are more capable to elaborate in technology than the South Asian. What does it mean, this in this case, naturalization of water, in different area of the globe?
Well, I think in much of the, say, Western, I mean, it's hard to always divide Western, say the more engineered and the more quickly developed countries, particularly with regards to economics, part of the richness gained was by harnessing our natural resources, right? By extraction, by controlling our rivers, by this extreme exploitation. I think what's to me interesting, particularly working in places like Vietnam and Cambodia, is that they've been a little bit slower, although catching up rapidly in terms of the economics. And the paradox at the moment, I think, and it's what we hear about always in political debates, IPCC reports and debates that come with that, is that many of these still growing context, they now want to exploit their natural resources the same way we did to get rich, right? So there's this incredible still building of dams, still wanting to exploit, to extractivist ways of building, where there's a luxury now of, say, richer economies to, exactly like we saw in Washington State, to kind of take away their dam. No, so this kind of the and the still exploitation, I think, are always going on simultaneously in different parts of the world, and this kind of reforestation, renaturalization. It comes with a certain degree of luxury to be able to do that, to a certain degree, but also, yeah, I think it's, for me, looking at different contexts, it really seems almost the only way forward if we understand how far we have gone to completely control nature. So I think it's is, as you say, it's an important prefix, and I think it's almost one that we need to understand more and more.
Ozan, I
Thank
think
you.
you had a comment. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I put a comment. Anyone can read it. Should I read it out loud?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes, please.
In my former city, Istanbul, like up until 50 years ago, in the Ottoman period, there were so many waterways within the city, which is being replaced by now by concrete, and there are only 15 of them left. And on top of it, they're trying to change the entire water flows of Istanbul, pumping water from the hinterland to Istanbul somehow from 200 kilometers away. Aslı would know better probably, and trying to open a new channel between the Black Sea and the Aegean Sea, Marmara Sea. It's really huge transformations. I don't know why I said that, but somehow it's just, I don't know what to do.
Maybe I can add something to that fact, because right now the whole political power game is kind of centered around this this project that would parallel the Bosphorus through the city, basically creating this second link between the Black Sea and the Marmara Sea. And I don't know how to call it, but maybe together we can find this, Kelly talked about the tech, the traditional environmental knowledge, and then the SEC, which is the scientific environmental knowledge. And then there's this whole anthropocentric and driven by the large capital and these autocracy powers to kind of undo all the knowledge. It's not the knowledge, but it's, I don't know, something else. I don't know how to call it, but it's this, I don't know, capitalist, environmental or non-environmental, non-knowledge, but somehow it's standing right, against any of the knowledge that we create from traditionally engaging with the environment or engaging with the environment through science, and just kind of violently and powerfully kind of driving these new water-based urbanisms that is probably going to destroy the whole ecosystem that Istanbul is depending on. And I think, I mean, I'm living in Istanbul and it's kind of in the heart of what I'm going through. These are certainly some strategies that we see repeated in elsewhere as well. Actually, in one of the news clips about this, I was reading that a similar and perhaps even larger project was planned in Thailand somewhere, but then it was stopped because they just it just didn't work at the end. But the whole the land use distribution already destroying some of the existing water resources. These projects, they do the damage even before they get implemented or they get finished. So,
Aslı, is there an environmental, an organized environmental response to this project? Is there any?
I mean, yes, not necessarily in environmental. It's both environmental, human. Like there are lots of collectives who have some common sense left in them, are against this this project, but then again, it's people and common kind of the common sense against the authority. So
right. Yeah, Tammy, you raised your hand too. Yeah.
Situation.
Hi, Kelly. Thank you for the presentation. I'm Tammy. I'm one of the residents in the animals here. And I'm also work a lot in, the water space of, or the water landscape of the Mekong Delta and the Mekong in general. So one of the questions I have for your presentation and for you is that, like we see all these water management scheme all through, even, like from the Khmer, these like large state-led water management system. Is there, and then it's now, right, like anything that has to do with water infrastructure that is coming from the state, and in your process of working and also kind of, promoting this way of working and living with water, how is that relationship and how is that changing the way that the state is approaching these new, or, like new way and softer way of approaching water management? Or not new, but a more sensitive way of approaching this.
Well, I think, Tommy, probably as you know, that the state in both in Vietnam and Cambodia is quite strong in different ways, of course. In Vietnam, we got very lucky to work with also some people in the state that wanted for you knowing, and specifically for the Kanto master plan, where we tried to, we made a plan that worked with kind of creating high dry islands of safe land that then could be surrounded by seas of water during flooding periods. And that was a kind of an exception, I would say, that it was brought on board by the state officials, because we know more and more, whether it's in Vietnam, Cambodia, or I would say anywhere in the world, humans don't like unpredictable things. No, water is unpredictable, and we also like clear lines. We like to know what is land and what is water. So much about rivers, so much about deltas. It's constantly shifting, constantly moving. You could even say the delta is mud. And humans like to, they're very frustrated with that. No, we know to build buildings, to build settlement, we don't build in mud, we build on land. So what do? We fill low land and turn it into land. So we turn mud or muddy waters or watery mud. We try to make much more of a distinction of what is land and what is water. One is dry and one is wet. One is for people, one is not for people. So kind of trying to get people to inhabit, to understand degrees of wetness, to understand muddiness, something we share with our colleagues, many people looking into this, but Anu Matur and Dilip Dakuna in Penn, of course. But it's, to me, the state, for instance, when we look in Cambodia, the Chinese, unfortunately, are now the shadow state behind the state in Cambodia. And they are wanting to transform this wonderful seasonal, massively transforming Tunnel Sap Lake also into land. So they want to dry the wetlands, dry the kind of grasslands, dry the flooded forest into land that is no longer problematic, in their words, and to turn it into agricultural land. So that's why I say the state is still, in many places, still driving forward in the paradigm of we need to engineer it, we need to define what is land and what is water. And I think the kind of going back, as we saw in Washington State and places that dare to renaturalize the rivers, whether it's in Istanbul. Also, Brussels used to be founded, the main river founded on Brussels, it's in a pipe. So do you renaturalize this to bring back the re that Maristella was talking about? It's still, I would say, marginal. And our kind of fight, and I saw somebody put in the chat also James Scott's in praise of floods. So instead of seeing them as problem, that they're much more necessary. They're necessary to give fertility to the earth, but also to, so I think that's yeah, that for us is it's a fight and trying to make this more evident of why we need to get away from from being so predictable and needing to know where is the line, literally.
And it's fascinating on many levels, of course, and problematic. And it seems global, right? That we still think like 100 years ago in many places, and in kind of in a opposite scale. Many studies today look at the ecosystem also a little bit less from an anthropocentric perspective, right? That is not only the use of land for what it serves humans, but how we make it survive through the lens also of other organisms. And I'm kind of bridging to the work of the fellows at NAHR that have been really looking at the micro scales. And Tammy, I brought up your image while you were talking about the larger scale, because when you were there, I don't know if you like to speak to this. That is a big jump, but it's just to say that, at the end we want to protect this other scale, right? I don't know, was a fascinating proposition. So you want to mention it?
Yeah, sure. I think this is so I was a resident during the year or the year of the animal, and my proposal was interested in looking at changing the perspective of, like usually as a landscape architect, we always design through perspective, right? Like we design as an outsider looking in, also as an architect. And so I was interested in like if we wanted to shift the way that we deal and design and approach our landscape, we should also change our perspective. And this is literally just changing the perspective from a human into what does like a frog would see, and mostly the attention would be focused on lower to the ground. And I think, like in a way that when we talk about water as well, right? I'm struggling with this because what come to my question is that, yes, like I think all of us here, we care about the environment, we care about, the soil, the land, the insects, the litter on the ground, and how the water move through the forest. But I'm trying to figure out like how do we tell that story, and how do we convince the people in power, like those who actually lead in these massive infrastructure projects to also think that way. I guess like through storytelling, through maybe projects like this. But yeah, it's something that I've been thinking about for a bit.
Which also the storytelling, I saw also Ho-Ting in the chat. I don't know, Ho-Ting, if you are around, or Sky also. Sorry, I'm trying to manage to scale down instead of scale up, to share your projects. I don't know, Sky, if you're there. Ho-Ting, hi. I'm gonna look for your as Tammy said, storytelling. It came to my mind, your project. I'm looking for it. Give me a second, please introduce yourself.
It's so nice to see this project, Larry. Like it's the way the book have been put together is just very fantastic. Congratulations.
Since we're on this one, I would just jump on what you were saying, Tammy, and say that
yes, and then we go to Ho-Ting. Yes, Sky, please.
Yeah, I'll just quickly say that I created these like immersion, like cues for immersion cards. Like how can we see this perspective shift? Like how can you kind of create kind of a game or a set of even like curiosity cards or like meditative like prompts to understand this, all about how like what are the forces behind what we typically think about. So like, and just what you were saying, like how does water move through leaves? What are all these different ways that even creatures those weird things at the top are like caddisfly, little larval cases, like how do they build these things that allow them to stay in water and transform? And how does water shape the rocks? Like kind of thinking about how everything is interdependent and connected was a big part of what I was, kind of the lens through which I was seeing the landscape, and how to create prompts to allow other people to see those things. So yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Ho-Ting, sorry, I'm having a blank in finding the page where your video, still motion video is. If you could speak to it, I'll promise I'll pull it up.
Okay, because I'm outside.
I don't hear her. Do you? Oh, okay.
She's
So-
muted right now.
Hi.
Yeah,
Hi.
yes, now we hear you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. My work it's so can you see me now? Because
Yes.
Yes.
okay. So my work because you're talking about storytelling, and my work is about a dialogue between me and the stones and the rocks. And it's telling a story about how the natural can heal us, and through this process, I like to show the power of healing that nature can help us to process the healing process to heal our wounded heart. So with the poetry, like words to describe this. Yeah, and I show the footage in the valley and make some experimental animation from real stones, and I put my character, which is a paper puppet, and I bring it to like go through around the valley and to touch stones to see the stones in different fields. So and in the end, I like to show that the nature can reflect ourselves, so we can rely this experience to know ourselves better. Yeah, that's this.
Thank you. I blink in the pages, and it's I'm coming back to it. but-
Ilaria, Maristela also had her hand up.
Yeah, while you're looking, searching for the page, Ilaria, may I have another comment
Sure,
quickly?
sure. Go for it.
Yes,
Go.
Yes,
yes.
back to Kelly. Kelly, I was extremely taken when you said, if I get it well, people want to know, what is land? It's almost a conundrum. What is land and what is water? They don't want to be into this in-between zone. And in a certain way, you see, I have seen this now happening in Italy very much, how much something that always seemed safe as a water becomes a big, big danger. As the land become bigger, as a water become a big burden when it becomes a land and vice versa. So there are these changes of condition, and at the same time, someone like Tammy, if I understand well, was speaking about scale. She said there is a micro scale and a macro scale, and there are organisms for which the in-between zone, water, land, is the vital zone. So, I know that it's an impossible way to, that's very difficult to answer, but also the people who work in water, planning water, the new field of designing water and water infrastructure have to consider also this in between as vital for our world. I don't know if she's still around, by the way, Kelly.
Yes, I'm still here. But I think you're right. And of course, I think most of the people gathered in this working on this book, and they're exactly looking at the in between, at the kind of interconnection between the macro and the micro, and understanding the kind of degrees of wetness and the degrees of dryness, if you want to put it, the degrees of landness and degrees of waterness, and not looking for the definitive either or, but I think that's a new challenge, because for so long, the way we've been educated and the way we understand that humankind can control nature, it's not through looking in these. So I think what Tammy showed of, it's not looking at it's not looking across scales, and it's not looking from the non-human perspective, and it's not it's wanting to always deliver definitive. This is this, when it literally becomes moneyed or a quagmire, we even have the notion drain the swamp. I mean, why? So I think it's hopefully it's a kind of paradigm shift that has to come from a reconceptualization of what we want to create, and how we can and then again the comes back, how to reinterpret the environment.
Yeah. But Kelly, of course, I mean, you will say it's very political, all this. I mean, you see people, desperation when they lose their house because of a flood. And maybe in an area where has always been water up to the moment when we became dry, because another political project, let's call quote unquote of modernization, changed the nature. I mean, so we are really in this continuous conundrum, which is very difficult. I mean, at least for me, very difficult to talk to people.
Well, you're exactly right, but but that's where I think, and I still believe that, of course, it's political, but I think design matters, and that we don't need to wait for the kind of new political project and the new policy, but it can, I hate the word bottom up personally, but I think design can influence policy. It can go the other way through very strong projects that kind of turn things a little bit upside down, which is, I think, what a great deal of art and artistic reconceptualization also does.
Yeah. I want to be optimistic with you right now, considering the country where you come from.
I have two passports, so I'm more proud of one at the moment than the other, of course.
Yes, excellent.
I think also the scale of some of our interventions are interesting in talking about this social this displacement of human displacement, that the climate refugees in a way, and those social implications, and how water is a protagonist. We had some very interesting projects about the role of women in water distribution in some countries, and how to represent that. And the work that I'm sharing here is the one by Sam that I see he's there too. If you want to mention these vessels that you design and build as a landscape architect, but thinking small in scale, Sam.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, this work was it took me a while to land on this project because I knew I was interested in migration in the valley as related to water, kind of water as a metaphor for folks migrating, following gravity towards greater sources of potential economic, social, whatever that may be, gravitating towards safety, security, and so I was spending a lot of time trying to learn about how resettlement was being done in the valley, and walked to Vedaseta several times and met with some refugees who had been resettled at a convent. Most of them had come from Western Africa and came to Italy, probably, Lampedusa or somewhere like this, and then found their way up to the sort of Taleggio Valley, where they were resettled. And I wanted to understand their stories, their desires. You get to know them just a lot better. And what I realized was there's a pretty incredible divide in the community socially. between the people who have remained in Vedaseta, mostly, older populations, and then these younger populations, pretty much all men in this particular resettled community. Um, and who were not really spending time together, talking together, learning about one another, but they all did go to the same water fountain. And so I began to think about the water fountain as a social collector, and wanted to create a tool or a puzzle in a way, whereby people could have nonverbal communication and collaboration. So these water vessels that I designed, these are just some sort of initial versions that you see here. You see more developed drawings laid over the drafts, but there was a series of 3 water vessels that required two people to sort of problem solve together in order to use them, and it was to sip, to serve, to share. So the idea that you would be able to only drink from it with the help of someone else. You could only pour water for someone else. And if you wanted to collect water, you had to work together to collect it. And the idea is that these are objects that could be left at a site, and bring people together in a collaborative sort of sense of curiosity, and create new potential for that fountain to become re-socialized in a time where language fails. That's sort of a synopsis of the project.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, there is a wealth of projects and on water, from the recreation also of from a chemical formula. You can recreate any water in the world. This is the work of an Australian couple that brought a bottle of Pellegrino water back to San Pellegrino, which is 10 miles away from us, and demonstrated kind of the absurdity also on this other scale of bringing the water to drink all around the world, etc. So this is just to share a page of the book with everyone. Deborah, we are at the hour. Time flies for some of us.
Right. Time flies when you're having fun. I really appreciate the emphasis on education, Kelly, and on creating the next generation of professionals who think differently about that in-between state between water and land, because I think it's going to be tremendously important for the health of the world. And I also really appreciate the idea of saying to those political leaders, political leadership, this may look like a way, for example, Ozan, the project in Asla in Tehran, to assure that the city continues to be safe, but how does the frog see it? Or how does some other creature see it? What is it going to do to their environment? I think that there's probably ways to say this to people in power that might have some impact. So thank you all for a great conversation. And thank you, Kelly, for a wonderful expletive presentation. I appreciate your time here, that you made time to spend with us in your busy schedule. And I turn it back to you, Ilaria.
Yes, we are taking 1 second.